Hello, my name is Laurel McKenzie, and today I'd like to talk to you about the efficacy of cross-cultural leadership in global virtual organizations. This topic has become increasingly important in the past few years, thanks to not only the pandemic, but also thanks to all the technological advances that have sent the global market, into a world of nearly endless possibilities regarding who you can connect with and how you can sell your services, your goods, things like that. It has become a recent passion for me due to my experiences in a global virtual organization. And so I really was excited about the opportunity to learn more about cross-cultural leadership and whether it could be effective in global virtual organizations or how it could be effective. So let's take a look at the agenda for today. First, we'll start with a definition of cross-cultural leadership and why it's important. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges that we see in leadership in global virtual organizations. And then I'll dive into a recipe for success, which will have three components: cultural intelligence, cross-cultural communication, and then a third component that I'll wrap up as flexibility and adaptability, and I'll explain more when we get to that point. And then we'll wrap up with a summary. Let's start with a definition for cross-cultural leadership. And this is coming from Wadhira's work this year, actually. So, cross-cultural leadership is the ability to understand and leverage cultural diversity within a team. And the success of international teams, and this is coming from Wadhira, hinges on the ability of leaders to change and adapt their leadership styles and strategies to accommodate the multiple diverse cultural differences that could occur in a global organization. This helps ensure a more collaborative and productive work environment. Cross-cultural leadership includes the ability to recognize cultural nuances and develop leadership approaches that are effective in these various cultures. Why is this important? Well, I want to start with the Bible and some biblical principles. Specifically starting in Proverbs 3:13, which says that those who find or blessed are those who find wisdom and those who gain understanding. And if we consistently seek wisdom and gain understanding about different cultures and the different places or just cultures or religions that people come from in work environments, we're more likely to be successful in organizations and achieving what we're setting out to achieve. And therefore, leaders are blessed when they do these things, when they do seek to understand others. And this actually ties great or very well into our next biblical verse, which should sound familiar as Liberty students, the Great Commission, which is in Matthew 28:19 through 20, which says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I, Jesus, have commanded you. And surely I, Jesus, am with you always to the very end of the age." So this is already built into our education. We are called to fulfill the Great Commission. And if leaders are going to fulfill their duties as Christian leaders, and they want to fulfill the Great Commission, it's within their best interest to learn how to communicate with other cultures. So they'll be blessed in finding wisdom and gaining understanding, but they will also be fulfilling the Great Commission by having that understanding and therefore being able to relate with people from all nations. The other reason that cross-cultural leadership is important is, and we've kind of already talked about this, is the rise in virtual and global teams. Virtual teams can be incredibly valuable because they overcome the limitations of time and space. You can better leverage and integrate different expertise, which improves innovation and collaboration and business effectiveness because you can use people from all different parts of the world that you might not have been able to before when we were relegated to an office space. It also can help reduce costs and save time, which increases productivity. So virtual teams are a really good thing. For all of these various reasons, we need leaders that can lead these new diverse groups of people who are coming together to be productive. Additionally, digitalization of goods, services, and information has become a huge thing, really, in 2024. Things flow much faster and easier now. Digitalization has become this huge shift in social and business life. You've got digital natives and remote work, and knowledge workers who they're selling their information basically, and they don't even have a product. It's opened up access to global markets for subject matter experts, and it's much easier to operate globally, especially with travel and communication having improved so much. So cross cross-cultural communication is becoming vital and important because we've gone digital in this era from what we sell to how we work together. Therefore, we need leadership again that knows how to operate in this environment with these different people. So let's look at the challenges that leaders face in these global virtual organizations. There's no shortage of things for leaders to worry about in these situations. A lot of literature is able to contribute to this. Diversity and cultural differences is probably one of the most obvious ones, with differences in values and beliefs. This type of diversity can cause confusion and poor understanding between team members. We also see difficulties and challenges with rapport and building trust. Effective communication can also be a massive challenge. Not only are language barriers something to consider, but also technology failures in the virtual world with Microsoft Teams and Slack and Google Meets and all the options that there are in the world for connecting. And that speaks really to the multiple communication mediums and trying to figure out which ones are most effective for the message you're trying to get across. There's also challenges in intergroup conflict, challenges with a lack of knowledge and stereotypical thinking. There's also challenges with time zone differences and just the difficulty in having remote interpersonal relationships. And all of these challenges and all these studies are showing that these challenges all lead to reduced team productivity and performance, and they really impact employee well-being and morale, which is leading to increased stress while working. It's also leading to high turnover rates and things like that. So we've got to figure out how to address all of these challenges that our leaders are facing. And for that, I have, through the research I've been doing, I've looked up or I've considered and compiled a recipe for success. And the first ingredient in this recipe is cultural intelligence. If we were going to define it, we could use Robert Sternberg's definition. He had an approach to intelligence that's often or leveraged when you think about cultural intelligence. But Sternberg said that he views intelligence in context as consisting of purpose, this is a hard word, purposive adaptation to, shaping of, and selection of real world environments relevant to one's life. Kind of a complicated definition, so if we look at it in a different way, cultural intelligence is the ability to understand, adapt, and behave effectively in new cultural settings with culturally diverse talent. And there are 4 dimensions to this that I have listed here on the right, and they come again from Robert Sternberg's original approach to intelligence. They've been adapted for cultural intelligence. And the 4 dimensions are cognitive, metacognitive, motivational, and behavioral. The cognitive dimension has to do with knowledge, acquiring knowledge about the norms and rules that govern a culture. This includes knowledge about the norms of a culture such as marriage, language, and religion. The metacognitive dimension is all about the ability to adjust or replace incomplete or incorrect knowledge about the culture. So you learn some new information from the cognitive dimension. Can you adjust or replace the information that you currently have to be more accurate with that culture? The motivational dimension is about the motivation to change the patterns of thinking that one might have and their behavior to consider and include new cultures, situations, or information. And then lastly, behavioral. This is your literal behavior change. This is changing your behavior to according to what you have learned in the cognitive dimension, your ability or willingness to adjust, your motivation to adjust, and then actually changing your behavior. And research by Ruth and Netzer and Shake and colleagues, they all agree that people with higher cultural intelligence are more culturally competent and are more effective in working with people from diverse cultures. They also both point out that these dimensions are trainable skills. People don't come just well equipped with all of these dimensions naturally necessarily. They can be trained into leader populations. Here are the benefits. And this again came out of Ruth and Netzer and Shake and colleagues' research. Cultural intelligence can improve employee engagement, which was a huge study done by, I believe, Ruth and Netzer, if I'm getting my two studies correct, where they did a whole study to look at how cultural intelligence impacts engagement. And what they found was that when cultural intelligence is increased, it increases that person's abilities to include others and enhance engagement between team members. It also, both studies agreed that cultural intelligence improves trust and rapport and facilitates a team identity. And I want to get into this a little bit more and what this means. And this is actually in Shake's and colleagues' studies. What they were looking at was this is actually, I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. It wasn't Ruth and Netzer with the engagement study. It was Shake and colleagues with the engagement study. And what they wanted to understand was how cultural intelligence impacts engagement. And one of the things they saw were that employees in a global context typically were more likely to prioritize their national identity over their work identity in work situations. And this was resulting in group formations based on national identity. And this had a negative impact on engagement because team members were basically grouping together based on their national identities as opposed to their work identities and their team identities. And what they found was that when cultural intelligence was improved, it helped to increase a greater sense of team identity. And that team identity is what helped improve engagement. What else they also found, and this is from Ruth and Netzer more specifically, was that people who had higher cultural intelligence are more receptive and open to sharing and advancing their ideas with people from different cultures. This helps to reduce emotional fatigue and reduce turnover. The next ingredient in our recipe for success for culture or cross-cultural leaders is cross-cultural communication, which might sound obvious, but let's walk through it. Cross-cultural communication is designed to or meant to improve and facilitate the interaction between employees, clients, and managers who are from different nations or cultures. And a study by, and I'm gonna butcher this name, Lefintsev and Welbrock found that cross-cultural communication was highly helpful, highly impactful for Millennial and Gen Z populations specifically, because they are among the first generations to be quote unquote digital natives. And so they really thrive in the digital space and found that improved communication between cultures really was important in order to be effective at work. And it's a great way to establish common ground rules. Cross-cultural communication is more effective for establishing common ground rules and promoting cultural awareness. And really, the best medium for cross-cultural communication that helps cross-cultural communication be so effective are digital tools because they are facilitators of effective communication. Lefintsev and Welbrock saw that digital tools, online translators and autocorrect really helped reduce language barriers. And they also found that text-based alternatives really helped to minimize complications and cultural differences. In fact, they had one qualitative piece of information that came from one participant that said, when it comes to text-based alternatives, the good thing about them is that you do not have to care about national customs concerning shaking hands, hugging, or tea ceremony when you can make online calls to your business partners from abroad. So cross-cultural communication is highly important because it helps with cultural awareness. It breaks down some of the challenges that we saw, like language barriers and cultural differences, especially if cross-cultural communication is leveraged through digital tools. So our third ingredient for cross-cultural leadership is flexibility and adaptability. I guess they're ingredients, aren't they? But there's a lot of layers to this ingredient. And so the first one we're going to talk about is playing multiple roles. An effective cross-cultural leader has to behave or play multiple roles in order to be effective. And this came out of research from Kashiv and colleagues. They looked at the behavioral complexity and leadership theory, and this theory helps leaders understand the various roles they have to play in order to effectively lead a team. And they broke it down into two categories, or the BCL theory of leadership breaks it down into two categories, internal and external. Internal roles are those that are needed to maintain the internal environment of the team, and the external roles are those that are needed to adapt to the external environment. So within these internal roles, you have, and both have four, but you have mentor, facilitator, monitor, and coordinator. In the mentor role, you're working to develop your team members and you're providing support. Facilitator role, you're trying to resolve conflict and encourage teamwork. When you're in the monitoring role, you're trying to manage information that's available to the team and also keep an eye on day-to-day tasks and manage performance. And in the coordinator role, you're trying to ensure continuity of tasks and create shared norms and values among the team by creating that continuity. In the external roles, you have the innovator, broker, producer, and director. Innovators are when you're in that role as a leader, you're able to scan the external environment and think about any external contingencies and think creatively to adapt to those changes. Brokers keep connection when you're in that role, you keep connection with the outside role and you know how to negotiate and acquire necessary resources to benefit the team. The producer role is when you're trying to help achieve organizational goals and improve productivity by managing time and stress for your team. And then the director role helps, when you're in that role, you're helping to clarify expectations and create vision and design and reorganize. In Kashiv and colleagues' research, they were trying to determine the impact of these various roles on global virtual teams. And their research showed that external roles specifically were vital for role clarity within the virtual teams, which helped to reduce the challenge around conflict. Continuous communication was also incredibly important for building trust and cohesion across all of these roles. And also what they found was that both internal and external roles impacted leadership effectiveness positively, which they drew the conclusion that in order for a leader to be effective, they need to actively work on cultivating skills in multiple roles. They can't just be one, but they must be many. The other layer of flexibility, and adaptability is using multiple styles. A study by Creed and colleagues examined the effectiveness of transformational leadership as a leadership style when it was moderated by diverse cultural values and practices. Basically, they wanted to understand if transformational leadership was effective in impacting performance cross-culturally. They looked at research from 215 samples in 34 countries. And what they found was that transformational leadership should not be considered universally effective. They found that cultural values and practices strongly moderated the effect of transformational leadership on performance. Specifically, transformational leadership was found to be least effective in European and North American cultures, which was actually quite surprising considering that the whole idea, the whole theory or style of leadership was developed in these areas. But actually, the strongest positive effect was in developing countries. Transformational leadership was super effective in cultures that had low gender egalitarian values, which means, and gender egalitarian values are principles and beliefs that advocate for equal rights, opportunities, and treatment for both genders. So it worked better in countries that didn't have a lot of emphasis on those values. It also was more effective in cultures with low humane orientation values. And what that means is that low or orientation values or humane orientation values are values that prioritize kindness, compassion, and concern for the welfare of others. They also found that transformational leadership was better in cultures with a high level of uncertainty avoidance. They want certainty and high future orientation values. So basically, transformational leadership works in cultures where they lack the things that transformational leadership offers or provides. Excuse me. It works in cultures that value charisma and the ability to inspire and challenge assumptions. And it works in cultures that take an interest or an active interest in employee well-being. So while the values might be low, what they want is a leader that values those things to help raise it up, and it's effective there. So between the Creed study and this other one by Wadhira, what has been found is that it's a one-size-fits-all approach will not be effective. Wadhira found that transformational leadership was the most prominently used leadership style by global leaders due to its effect on, or its impact and effectiveness on inspiration, motivation, and developing a shared vision. But, however, situational leadership and cultural intelligence are also imperative. What they both agreed on is that leaders must be flexible and adaptable in their leadership style, and they must consider multiple leadership styles in order to resonate with diverse populations. This includes being open to appreciating cultural diversity to help build trust and rapport. And both studies also highlighted the importance of cultural intelligence and clear communication. So, what are the takeaways? Basically, what we've learned are that leaders face many challenges in the new virtual and global work environment. These challenges range from cultural differences, interpersonal conflict, miscommunication, and difficulty building trust, all the way to geographical dispersion, including challenges with different time zones and availability. There are 3 strategies that a leader should use in order to be effective cross-culturally, in order to really become a cross-cultural leader. 1, they need to cultivate cultural intelligence, or the ability to understand, adapt, and behave effectively in new cultural settings. This has 4 dimensions: cognitive, metacognitive, motivational, and behavioral. They've got to be able to do all 4 dimensions. Second, they have to be adept at cross-cultural communication, including using the digital tools available to reduce some of those cross-cultural challenges. Across all studies I looked at, communication was key, and using the digital tools available can help reduce some of those barriers, such as language barriers and some behavioral differences that come with different cultures. And lastly, leaders must be flexible and adaptable in their roles and their styles of leadership. They need to be able to take on multiple and diverse roles, and they need to utilize multiple leadership styles in order to resonate with different cultures. And that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something about cross-cultural leadership. And if you'd like to learn more, here are my references.